At dinner, Mom slid a crisp white envelope toward my sister. Inside, $150,000, enough for her new home. Dad didn't hesitate. Then he looked at me and said, "You're the disappointment. We invest in winners." The air thickened. Forks paused midair. Grins faltered. I didn't cry. I folded my napkin, stood, and left. I didn't look back. That night, I didn't beg for validation or fairness. I made a silent vow to myself to start something they could never predict. Years earlier, at 12, I had built a suspension bridge out of wire and drinking straws for the state science fair. It held the weight of an entire textbook. I won first prize. Standing on that gymnasium stage, I scanned the crowd for my parents, 2 empty seats at the front. They were in Denver, cheering for my sister at a beauty pageant. When I returned home with the fragile metal bridge in hand, glowing with pride, Dad barely glanced at it before turning up the TV. "Weird girl," he muttered. "Why do you play with machines?" Mom stayed silent, stroking Jessica's hair as my sister displayed her Little Miss Sunshine crown beneath the living room lights. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the silence after them. The quiet where love should have lived. Growing up, I realized their love had a price tag. Every smile, every gift, every word of encouragement came with conditions. Jessica was their golden child, the one who effortlessly earned praise, second chances, and endless indulgence. I was the fallback. Independent, resilient, invisible. I worked late shifts to fund my own college tuition while Jessica's was fully covered. I graduated with honors, secured my first engineering role, and sent them photos of my bridges, apartment buildings, steel beams carving into the skyline. Dad's only comment: "Still renting." Every phone call was a comparison. My life versus Jessica's promotions, engagements, new cars. They never asked about me, they measured me against her shadow. Despite everything, I clung to hope that one day they'd see me as more than a failed gamble. That hope shattered the night of the dinner. When Dad declared, "We invest in winners," something inside me snapped. I stopped chasing approval. I stopped explaining myself. I started distinguishing between silences that crush you and silences that save you. I packed my bags, left Colorado Springs, and drove back to Denver. No calls, no tears, just the hum of the tires and a vow. If they wouldn't recognize my worth, I'd construct it brick by brick, until the world couldn't ignore it. Losing my family was one silence. Losing my job became another. It happened on a gray March morning, the kind where even the sky feels heavy. My company had been struggling for months, but I convinced myself I was secure. I stayed late, met every deadline, worked tirelessly. Then the layoff list appeared. My name sat there in stark print. I stepped into the snow clutching the termination letter, feeling the cold cut deeper than I expected. For a moment I stood on the sidewalk, staring at passing cars, wondering how many times life lets you rebuild from nothing. That night, I sat in my small apartment, city lights flickering on the window. The silence was oppressive, heavy, reverberating with every hum from the fridge. I opened the Bennett family group chat. There she was, Jessica, standing proudly in front of her new home, champagne raised. Our parents smiled beside her, frozen in a portrait of triumph. Caption: "So proud of our youngest daughter." I stared at it. Slowly I typed, "Thank you for teaching me to stand on my own, even in the cruelest way." I sent the message. Then I blocked their numbers, deleted the chat, and let my phone go dark. For the first time there was no audience. No judgment. Just me. Fear came first. What if I failed again? What if they were right? But beneath it something else grew. A quiet, potent freedom. The next morning I rose before dawn. No job. No plan. But choice. I could spend my life proving them wrong, or I could create a world where their opinions didn't matter. I made coffee, opened my sketchbook, and drew a single line, the rough outline of a small house. I didn't know then that line would mark the first step toward everything that followed. Weeks blurred into each other. Cold coffee, unanswered applications, silence that made the refrigerator hum like a conversation. Denver was still limping from the recession. No one was hiring. One afternoon I found refuge in a small, tired cafe called Harlan's Corner. Dim lights, chipped tables, the lingering scent of burnt espresso. I sat in the corner, laptop open, half working, half wondering how long I could keep pretending. Then a man in his 60s approached, silver hair streaked with paint, hands callous from labor. You're Wendy Bennett, right? The engineer. I blinked. Used to be, I replied. He smiled. Used to be is perfect. I could use someone like you. Cafe's falling apart. I've got about 3,000 to fix it. Interested. 3,000? Not even enough for rent. But something in his voice, earnest, trusting, made me nod. I'm in. For weeks I practically lived there. I repainted walls, rearranged furniture, rewired light fixtures, and reimagined the space. I used reclaimed wood for the counter, added pendant lighting, and covered one wall with mirrors to brighten the room. When it was finished, Harlan stood in the center, eyes glistening. It feels alive again, he whispered. And for the first time in a long while, so did I. You've got a gift, kid, he said, almost like a whisper, as if revealing a secret. A week later, a local magazine ran a tiny piece. A neglected cafe revived by a local engineer. The photo showed me behind the counter. Jeans streaked with paint, exhausted but grinning. By morning, my inbox was flooded. People wanted help redesigning their shops, their homes, anything that had lost its charm. I didn't have a business, just a sketchbook and a handful of tools, but I agreed. One of my first projects brought me to a quiet town west of Denver. An old brick house that belonged to a retired veteran. The moment I arrived, I met him. Ethan Walker, a tall, broad-shouldered engineer. Dust clung to his sleeves, cement smeared on his hands, and his gray eyes were calm like the first winter morning. You're the designer? He asked. I nodded. And you're the one making sure it doesn't collapse, he added with a chuckle. Then we'll get along fine. We did more than just get along. Ethan was steady, deliberate, patient, the kind of person whose presence made silence feel safe. We worked side by side for weeks, measuring beams, debating layouts, sketching on scraps of paper. Sometimes we didn't speak for hours. We just moved together in rhythm. One afternoon, crouched on the floor redesigning a corner of the living room, he handed me a water bottle. You lose track of everything when you work, he said. I smiled without looking up. That's the point, I said. He hesitated, then quietly added, You look at a house like it has a soul. I laughed softly, brushing it off, but that night, lying in bed, his words echoed in my mind. When the project ended, he invited me to dinner near Sloan's Lake. Over bread, wine, and warm lamplight, we talked about more than buildings. Fear, failure, and the fragile peace of starting over. I told him about losing my job, about leaving my family behind. He didn't offer pity. You don't need their approval, he said. You already made something they can't touch. For the first time in years, someone truly saw me, not the version my parents dismissed, but the woman I had fought to become. Weeks later, he called. I have a wild idea, he said. Ever thought about designing a home that generates its own energy? Small, self-sufficient, sustainable. I froze. That dream, long buried, dismissed as too risky, was suddenly alive again. Yes, I whispered. Then it's time, he said. We called it the Eco Home Project. Months later, we found a 5-acre plot in Oregon, cliffs tumbling to the ocean below. The owner, an elderly man with gentle eyes, had wanted to build there once. My wife passed before we could, he said softly. When we explained our vision, he nodded. I'll lower the price. You two will make it a home worth living in. Ethan covered the rest. No strings, he said. Just partnership. We pitched a tent near the clearing. Pines swayed in the ocean breeze. Every morning we brewed coffee over a portable stove, then worked until our hands blistered. We cleared stones, laid the foundation by hand, and built what I named Evergreen Cabin. 600 square feet of wood, solar panels, a rainwater system, all crafted from discarded materials. Everything sustainable. Everything reclaimed. Like me. Some days exhaustion made me want to give up. My hands cracked from cold, my body ached from labor. But each evening, sitting by the fire, I gazed at the rising frame and whispered, This is what it means to rebuild yourself. By the 10th month, the cabin was finished. Pale wood, floor-to-ceiling windows, a porch that stretched toward the ocean. When the sun hit it just right, it seemed alive, as if it had its own heartbeat. I posted a single photo online, built this myself. By morning, it had gone viral. Messages poured in. You made me believe. You turned heartbreak into something beautiful. Finally, the world saw me as I always wished my parents would. One quiet May morning, lavender blooming along the porch, a silver BMW screeched to a halt. The door flew open. It was Jessica. 2 years older, immaculate, yet trembling. "Dad, you need to come." I stepped down from the porch, still wearing my gardening gloves. "Jess, what's wrong?" She froze, eyes sweeping over the cabin, the solar panels, the untamed garden behind me. "You live here," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "And I built this with the help of people who believed in me, the one my parents called a failure." For the first time, her confidence faltered. She ran her hand along the cabin wall, swallowing hard. I didn't know. After my divorce, I moved back home. They pay for everything. Mom says, "Don't be reckless like your sister." And I listen. The wind caught her hair. She looked small, fragile, the girl I used to protect from our parents' fights. I felt no anger, only a deep, quiet sadness. We had grown up in the same house, taught opposite lessons. I had been forced to survive alone. She had been taught to rely entirely on others. She brushed her fingers over the wood. I let her linger. For once, I was not the child seeking approval. I was the woman who had built her own world. "You have it all," she whispered, voice trembling. "And I don't even know who I am anymore." I looked at her with quiet certainty. "Then stop living for them, Jess. Start living for yourself." She let out a shaky laugh, bitter and soft. Easier said than done, she thought. We stood there in silence until she finally murmured, "They're coming." When the SUV appeared minutes later, I already knew how this confrontation would unfold. My father climbed out first, veins standing out across his flushed neck. Mom followed behind him, her hands trembling. "Where did you get the money for this?" Dad demanded, voice sharp. "You expect me to believe you built all this on your own?" I set my gloves down, wiped my hands on my jeans, and met his gaze without flinching. "From the moment you called me a failure," I said steadily, "I started collecting something you could never touch. My work, my grit, my peace." He blinked, caught off guard. "Every insult, every comparison to her." I gestured toward the cabin behind me. "This is what I built from all of it." Mom's voice shook. "We only wanted what was best for you." I laughed softly, not a tear in sight. "No. You wanted what made you look best." Dad stepped closer, scanning the walls like he was searching for a flaw. "You did this to humiliate us." "No," I said quietly. "I did this to survive you." The air hung heavy. The only sound was the distant crash of the ocean. Ethan emerged from the cabin, calm as ever, wiping his hands on a rag. He nodded politely at my parents before standing silently beside me. Steady, wordless support. For the first time, I caught a flicker of something in my father's eyes. Not anger. Not pride. Shame. "Did you do all this for revenge?" he asked finally. I shook my head. "Revenge would mean I still care what you think." "I don't." The wind whispered through the pines, carrying the soft scent of lavender between us. Jessica stood to the side, tears shimmering in her eyes. Dad's shoulders slumped. "We were wrong," he admitted. Mom buried her face in her hands, quiet sobs escaping. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. "I don't need to forgive you to be free," I said softly. "I already am." They left soon after. The SUV disappeared down the gravel road, leaving the forest in serene stillness. I stood on the porch, heart racing, not with anger but with release. Ethan draped his arm around me. "You okay?" I looked out at the trees as golden sunlight spilled across the cabin. For the first time, I felt completely whole. A week later, a cream-colored envelope arrived. No return address, just my name in my father's careful handwriting. Inside was a letter and a photo of our old house with a for sale sign out front. His words wavered. "We loved you in the wrong way. Through fear. Through comparison. We're starting over. And for the first time, we are proud of you." I didn't cry. I didn't reply. I stepped outside, breathing in the pine-scented air, and planted a young tree near the porch, a symbol of a fresh beginning. Ethan joined me, holding a small walnut box he had carved from the first tree we felled for the cabin. Inside was a simple wooden ring. "Wendy Bennett," he said softly, "will you keep building with me?" I laughed through the tears. "Only if we draw the blueprint together." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the forest, I wrote a final line in my journal. They gave her $150,000. They gave me silence. And that silence became my foundation. The wind stirred through the trees like a promise. Sometimes revenge isn't about making someone pay. It's about showing them your happiness doesn't depend on their approval. My parents gave me silence. And from that silence I learned everything about strength, boundaries, and peace. If you've ever been told you'd never make it, I hope my story reminds you. You can build a life from the ground up. One that no one can ever take away. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And if this story touched you, hit subscribe, share it, and stay tuned for the next one. You are not alone.